In 1981, a young undergraduate at Yale submitted a design to a public competition for a memorial for the Vietnam War. She was a student, Asian, and female. These things she knew would not help her chances of winning the competition, so as much as possible she concealed her identity so that only her work would be judged in the competition. She won. Maya Lin's design was chosen by the committee. Her design, as you know, was stark, a black granite V-shaped wall with 58,195 names carved into its cold, hard surface. Lin's concept was to create symbolically a wound in the earth, to symbolize the loss of so many soldiers. She also wanted the reflection of the visitor to subtly show in the background of the names, thereby joining the past with the present to help a nation heal its wound. There were no statues planned, no glorification of war, no patriotic symbols, just names. When her design was displayed publicly, there was a huge outcry. No, this is not what we were expecting. It's too modern. It's too plain. Ross Perot and James Webb, a senator from our own Commonwealth, immediately withdrew their support. And when asked, Senator Webb said, "I never in my wildest dreams imagined such a nihilistic slab of stone." And his sentiments were echoed around the country. Because of the public outcry, the Department of the Interior initially refused to issue a building permit for the memorial. Eventually, as you know, with very minor alterations, the wall was built. And later, Jan Scruggs, a Vietnam vet and founder of the Vietnam Veterans Memorial Fund, reflected on the wall and said, "It has become something of a shrine for our country." I saw its ability to heal when the traveling version of the wall came to where we lived in Greenville, South Carolina. My father, who was drafted late in the war and was never sent into combat, lost many friends in the war. He wouldn't talk about it very often. But I sensed that with his pangs of loss, he also felt some guilt in that he had made it through when so many of his friends hadn't. He wanted to go see the wall. In fact, he talked about it for weeks before it came to town. He went alone, and he never said much about it afterwards, but I found in his truck, which he treats like a personal office, the rubbings of the names of his friends. Who would have thought that a simple black slab of stone with names on it would help heal the country? Who would have thought that the horrors of war and the sacrifices made in that awful conflict would be memorialized in a wall that is approachable, interactive, and reflects the present and the past at once? After seeing its effect on my father, I think it's right to say that the wall has done more to heal this country of that terrible period than maybe any other single effort. In our gospel reading, we find a similar theme, a theme of expectation and hope challenged by the starkness of reality. We're told in our reading from Zechariah, "Rejoice greatly, O daughter of Zion. Shout aloud, O daughter Jerusalem. Lo, your king comes to you. Triumphant and victorious is he, humble and riding on a donkey, on a colt, the foal of a donkey." And John the Baptist, the herald of the coming one, was imprisoned and beheaded. And the Christ he announced, arrested and crucified. That wasn't what we expected. That was not the healing we were looking for. We played the flute for you and you did not dance. We wailed, and you did not mourn. We didn't get what we had hoped. Some of us, perhaps many, have been taught that the hopes of Israel were misplaced hopes. Hopes for political regime change, hopes for a warrior Messiah. And because they, the Jews, didn't get what they were expecting, they rejected Jesus. I want to challenge this teaching. It's not just the condition of Judaism that God acts in ways contrary to expectation. It's common to everyone on earth. We all expect things of God, want God to be or do or act in a certain way, and when that doesn't happen, we think God has failed us. Remember that story on Easter Sunday of Mary at the tomb, searching for Jesus, lost in her grief for her Lord. And when she begins speaking to him, she thinks he's just the gardener. But when he calls her name, she recognizes him and tries, John tells us, to hold on to him. Jesus tells her not to, that he will ascend and she will know him in a different way. It can be unsettling when God acts in ways we don't expect. It's disorienting, but it can also be healing. I've shared this story with some of you before, but the theme of the gospel today it fits the theme of the gospel so well today that it bears repeating. There was a religion professor from Oklahoma who liked the Smoky Mountains of Tennessee. He and his wife would often vacation there. One night they were at a restaurant called the Blackberry Inn. On one side of the restaurant there was a plate glass window giving a full view of the peaks of the mountains. They were relaxing, perusing the menu, and an old man, well advanced in years, came up and said to them, "Good evening. Y'all on vacation?" The professor said, "Yes, sir." And the old man asked, "Are you having a good time?" And the professor thought to himself, "Well, we were." And then replied to the old man, "Yes." The old man, not sensing that they wanted to be left alone, continued, "What do you do?" The professor replied, "I teach in a seminary." "Oh," the old man said, "you're a preacher." The professor gave a reluctant yes. The old man pulled up a chair and said, "I want to tell you a story." He said, "I was born back here in these mountains, and my mother was not married. And in those days, such shame. And when we went to town, the other women looked at her and looked at me and began guessing who I was and who my father might be. The reproach that fell on her fell on me, and it was painful. At school, the children had a name for me, and I hid in the weeds at recess and ate my lunch alone." He said, "I started going to a little church called Laurel Springs, and there was a preacher, a rough preacher with a beard and a big booming voice. The old man said he scared me, but he fascinated me. I would go just for the sermon because I was afraid someone would speak to me in the earlier part and say, 'What's a boy like you doing at church?' One Sunday, after I had been going for some time, some of the people queued up in the aisle, and I couldn't rush out like I usually did. I couldn't get by. He said, I began to chill. Oh, somebody will say something to me, and I need to get out of here. He said, just then I felt a hand on my shoulder. I looked out of the corner of my eye, and it was that preacher. I saw his beard, and I saw his face, and I thought, oh no. He said the preacher looked at him and said, well, boy, you're a child of... And he paused. And the old man said he thought, oh no. Boy, you're a child of God. I see a striking resemblance. The old man said that the preacher patted him on the back and said, son, go claim your inheritance. The professor looked at the old man and said, "What's your name?" The old man replied, "Ben Hooper." The professor said, "Oh yeah, I remember my father telling me about the people of Tennessee twice electing an illegitimate governor named Ben Hooper." Governor Hooper said, "I was born that day. I was born that day." God acts in surprising ways, but ways that are always healing, always including, always loving, even at great cost. Come to me, all you that are weary and are carrying heavy burdens, and I will give you rest. Take my yoke upon you and learn from me, for I am gentle and humble in heart, and you will find rest for your souls. Amen.